My daughter told me her ex-husband was abusive, so I bought him a house. My daughter's ex-husband was the most abusive piece of shit I'd ever met. At least that's what she told me for 2 years straight. Every phone call, every visit, Katie would have new stories about Finn's latest cruelty, how he controlled her money, how he screamed at the kids, how she flinched when he moved too fast. I spent months planning how to get her out. Found the perfect house 20 minutes from mine, 3 bedrooms, good school district, fresh start for her and my grandkids. When I texted her, "I bought you a house, tour tomorrow at 3 p.m., she sent back 17 heart emojis and called me crying happy tears. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about finally getting Katie and the kids somewhere safe. Tomorrow I was going to hand her the keys to freedom from her monster husband. Then at 11 p.m. my phone rang. Finn's name on the screen made my blood run cold. I almost didn't answer, but his voicemail sounded broken and desperate. So I called back. "Sir, I need to show you something before tomorrow. Please. I know you hate me, but this is about Katie." I told him to go to hell, but just before I could hang up, he said something that stopped me cold. "I have security footage from our house. You need to see who she really is." 20 minutes later, I'm staring at my laptop screen watching Ring camera footage from their living room. Katie's screaming at Finn while he's backed into a corner holding their youngest, shielding her with his body. Katie throws a lamp. It shatters against the wall inches from the baby's head. Finn doesn't raise a hand, doesn't yell back, just keeps saying, "Please, Katie, not in front of the kids." My stomach turned inside out. There were dozens of videos. Katie attacking him with her fists while he covered his face. Katie threatening to tell everyone he beats her if he doesn't give her money. Katie laughing on the phone telling someone, "He's such a pissy, he won't even defend himself." Finn's voice cracked through the phone. "I never touched her. Never. I just wanted you to know the truth before you reward her lies." But that wasn't even the worst part. Finn had screenshots from her phone, multiple affairs over the past year, different men, explicit messages, meeting them while telling Finn she was at her sister's. One guy in particular showed up constantly, someone named Derek. I sat there for an hour trying to process that my daughter, the woman I was about to give a free house to, was the actual abuser, the monster. And she'd made me hate an innocent man who was just trying to protect his kids. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I tracked down Derek through social media. Wasn't hard since Katie had tagged him in old posts before blocking me from seeing her profile properly. I called him from a number he wouldn't recognize. "Hey, is this Derek? I need to ask you about Katie Fret." Long pause. "Who is this?" "Her father." "I need to know. Did you know she was married?" The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then quietly, "What?" "Number. She said she was a single mom escaping her abusive ex-husband. Said he was dangerous. Said she was terrified of him." My heart sank even further. "Derek, she's been married to Finn this entire time. He's not her ex. He's not abusive. She made it all up." I heard him sit down hard. His voice came out strangled. "I've been picking up her kids from school, taking them to the park. They call me Uncle Derek. I thought I was helping save them from their dangerous dad." The poor guy sounded sick. Then I had an idea that would change everything. "Derek, how would you feel about being at the house tomorrow when I show it to her? With Finn there too? You want us both there? I think Katie needs to face both of you at once. No escape routes, no lies." We spent an hour planning it. Derek would arrive early and wait in the living room. Finn would be in the kitchen. I'd walk Katie through the house, saving those rooms for last. The next afternoon, Katie pulled up right at 3 p.m., practically bouncing out of her car. She hugged me tight, tears already in her eyes. "Dad, you saved my life. I can finally escape. The kids are going to be so happy here." I led her inside, letting her gush about each room. The bedrooms where her kids would sleep peacefully. We reached the living room. "This is perfect for—" She stopped mid-sentence. Derek was sitting on the couch with his laptop open. Katie's face went white. "What is he doing here?" Before Derek could answer, Finn walked out from the kitchen. Katie actually stumbled backward, grabbing the wall for support. No, you can't both be here." "Dad, what is this?" Derek spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. "You told me you were divorced. You told me Finn was dangerous. You made me think I was protecting those kids from a monster." Finn just stood there, looking at her with such exhaustion it hurt to witness. 2 years, Katie. 2 years of being hit, threatened, isolated from my own children while you told everyone I was the abuser." Katie started spinning, looking for an exit, but I blocked the doorway. Her tears came fast now, but they weren't real. I could finally see that. "Daddy, please, it's not what it looks like." I pulled out the house deed from my jacket pocket. She reached for it desperately. Thank you. I know this looks bad, but the house isn't in your name, Katie." She froze. "What?" "It's in Finn's name. For him and the kids after the divorce." She grabbed the knife from the kitchen. Derek moved faster than I thought possible, lunging across the room and grabbing Katie's wrist before she could swing the blade at anyone. He twisted hard and she screamed, a sound of pure rage mixed with pain, and the knife clattered to the tile floor. Finn immediately stepped in front of both kids, shielding them with his whole body, while I kicked the knife hard toward the front door, sending it skittering across the hardwood until it hit the wall. Katie dropped to her knees, sobbing, but these tears looked different from every manipulative performance I'd witnessed over 2 years. These were the tears of someone whose entire fake world just shattered in front of everyone. Her face crumpled in a way I'd never seen before, raw and desperate and real. Derek kept his hand on her arm, not letting go, while she shook and cried on the floor. The kids were pressed against Finn's legs, the little girl hiding her face while the boy stared at his mother with wide, scared eyes. My hands shook so bad I almost dropped my phone, pulling it from my pocket, but somehow my voice came out steady when the operator answered. I told them my daughter just threatened people with a weapon, and we needed police right away, gave them the address, confirmed everyone was currently safe. Katie's sobs turned into screaming before I even hung up, yelling that we all planned this together, that we ambushed her, that she's the real victim here and we're all liars. Her voice got louder and more frantic with each accusation, spittle flying from her mouth as she thrashed against Derek's grip. He held firm on her arm while Finn crouched down with both children, whispering something I couldn't hear over Katie's screaming. The boy was crying now too, quiet tears running down his face while his dad rubbed his back. Katie kept shouting that this was all a setup, that we conspired against her, that any judge would see through our lies. I stood between her and the door, phone still in my hand, watching my daughter completely fall apart. The police arrived in 6 minutes, though it felt like an hour. 2 officers came through the front door I'd left unlocked, and the older one, whose badge said Hoffman, took control immediately with calm authority. Katie switched tactics the second she saw the uniform, her screaming cutting off like someone flipped a switch. Tears still streaming, voice shaking, she told Officer Hoffman that these men attacked her in her own house, and she grabbed the knife to defend herself. I watched her perform, recognizing every gesture and tone from 2 years of believing her lies. The trembling lip, the wide, scared eyes, the way her voice broke on certain words. She was good, so convincing that I saw the younger officer's expression soften with sympathy. But Hoffman kept his face neutral, professional, asking her to please step over here with his partner while he spoke with the rest of us. Katie's protests started up again, louder and more desperate, insisting they had it all wrong, begging them to listen to her side. Finn moved quietly to Hoffman, pulling his phone from his pocket with hands that shook slightly. He explained he brought security footage specifically in case Katie became violent, that he had months of evidence documenting her behavior. The officer took the phone and started watching, his partner keeping Katie separated on the other side of the room. I watched Hoffman's face change as he scrolled through the videos, his jaw tightening, eyes narrowing. He watched clip after clip, Katie throwing things, Katie screaming, Katie hitting Finn while he protected the kids. The professional mask cracked just slightly, his expression shifting from neutral to grim understanding. Katie saw him watching, and her protest got louder, more frantic, demanding to know what lies Finn was showing him, insisting the videos were fake or edited or taken out of context. She was panicking now, really panicking, because her usual manipulation wasn't working on this officer who kept watching evidence of exactly who she really was. Hoffman asked if anyone got hurt during the incident, and Derek held up his left arm, showing a thin cut along his forearm. Blood had dried in a dark line where Katie's initial swing grazed him before he grabbed her wrist. The officer called for an ambulance to check it out, then started taking statements from each of us separately. Derek went first, explaining how he grabbed her wrist and twisted until she dropped the knife. Then me, describing what I witnessed and why we were all here in the first place. Finn gave his statement while holding both children, his voice quiet but steady, as he explained the years of abuse and why he documented everything. Katie demanded a lawyer the second Hoffman approached her, refusing to say anything else, which was probably the smartest choice she'd made all day. Her face had gone cold now, calculating. The tears dried up as she realized she needed to protect herself legally. The paramedic showed up and treated Derek's cut, which turned out to be shallow but needed cleaning and a bandage. While he worked, Hoffman kept reviewing everything on Finn's phone, scrolling through the screenshots of Katie's affair messages and threats. His partner stood nearby taking notes as Hoffman asked questions, building a timeline of abuse that stretched back years. Then Hoffman looked at Finn and asked directly if he wanted to press charges for domestic violence, explaining that the pattern of documented abuse combined with today's knife incident made a strong case. Finn looked down at his kids, the boy clinging to his shirt, the girl with her thumb in her mouth. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him weighing his love for his children against years of fear and pain. Finally, he said yes, so quiet I barely heard him, that he wanted them safe from their mother's violence. His voice cracked on the last word, and he pulled both kids closer. Katie started screaming again when Hoffman told her she was under arrest, fighting against the handcuffs as his partner put them on. She yelled that I was supposed to be on her side, that I'm her father. How could I let them do this to her? I made myself look directly at her, meeting her eyes even though it hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt. I told her I loved her, but I couldn't protect her from the consequences of her own choices anymore. Her face twisted with rage and she spat at me, actual spit hitting my shirt before the officers pulled her toward the door. I stood there watching them lead my daughter away, her screaming fading as they got her outside to the patrol car. This might be the last time I saw her as a free person, and that thought made my chest feel hollow and heavy at the same time. The little girl started crying harder when her mom left, and Finn picked her up, bouncing her gently and making soothing sounds. After the patrol car pulled away with Katie inside, Finn just collapsed onto the couch with both children wrapped tight in his arms. All three of them shook like they'd been holding everything in, and finally let it go, the trauma releasing now that the immediate danger passed. I sat down heavy in a chair across from them, suddenly feeling every single one of my 62 years in my bones. My hands still trembled slightly, and my heart pounded too fast. Derek stood by the window looking out at the empty street, his bandaged arm hanging at his side. Nobody spoke for several minutes, just the sound of the kids' quiet crying and Finn's whispered comfort. The house felt too quiet after all the screaming and chaos, like the walls themselves were processing what just happened. I broke the silence first, apologizing to Finn for the 2 years I spent believing Katie's lies and supporting her abuse of him without knowing it. The words felt inadequate for the harm I'd caused, but I needed to say them anyway. Finn shook his head, still holding his kids, and said he understood. Katie was incredibly convincing, and he doubted his own reality many times before he started recording evidence to prove to himself he wasn't crazy. His forgiveness somehow made me feel worse instead of better, because he shouldn't have to comfort me, the father of the woman who terrorized him for years. I was supposed to protect people, and instead I'd become another weapon Katie used against him. The boy looked up at me with red eyes, and I tried to smile reassuringly, but I'm not sure it worked. Derek finally spoke up from his spot by the window, his voice coming out hollow and distant. He asked how long Katie was actually married and living with Finn, like he needed to understand the full scope of the lies. Finn explained they'd been married 8 years and living together the entire time, that Katie would meet Derek during school hours when the kids were in class, or tell Finn she was visiting her sister for the evening. Derek sat down hard on the arm of the couch, putting his head in his hands. I watched him process that he'd been helping her cheat while she painted her husband as a monster, that he'd been picking up kids from the school thinking he was protecting them from their dangerous father, when really he was enabling their mother's abuse. The weight of being manipulated settled over all three of us men in different ways, each of us realizing how thoroughly Katie had controlled our understanding of reality. The boy peeked around Finn's leg, his eyes red and puffy from crying. He looked maybe 7 years old, with Finn's dark hair and Katie's green eyes. He studied my face for a long moment before speaking in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Are you the grandpa Mommy always talks about?" I felt something crack open in my chest. I knelt down to his level, making myself small and non-threatening. "Yes, I'm your grandfather. I'm so sorry I didn't know about you and your sister until today." The boy's lower lip trembled. "Are you going to hurt my daddy like Mommy does?" The question hit me harder than anything else that happened today. This child had watched his mother abuse his father for so long that he expected all adults to be violent. I reached out slowly, letting him see my hands were empty and open. "No, buddy. I would never hurt your dad. I was wrong about what was happening in your family. I want to help keep all of you safe now." The little girl, who couldn't be more than 3, peeked out from behind Finn with wide eyes. She had blonde curls and wore a pink shirt with a cartoon character on it. "Is the yelling over?" Her tiny voice made my throat tight. Finn gathered both kids closer and kissed the top of the girl's head. "Yes, sweetheart, the yelling is over. And guess what? Grandpa is going to help us move our things into this house. This is our new home now." The boy looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time. "We get to live here? Without Mommy?" Finn's face showed so much pain and relief mixed together. "For now, yes. Just us." Derek stood up from the couch, his bandaged arm hanging at his side. He looked completely lost, like someone had pulled the ground out from under his feet. "I should go. I need to process all this." He walked toward the door without looking at any of us. I followed him out to make sure he was okay to drive. He sat in his car for a minute with his head on the steering wheel before starting the engine and pulling away. When I came back inside, Finn was explaining to the kids that they needed to get their clothes and toys from the old house. The boy asked if Mommy would be there. Finn promised she wouldn't. Over the next 2 hours, Finn and I made 6 trips between the old house and the new one. We worked in silence mostly, both of us trying to wrap our heads around everything that happened. The old house felt wrong somehow, like a place where bad things happened. I could see marks on the walls where things had been thrown, a dent in the kitchen cabinet at exactly fist height. Finn packed the kids' rooms first, carefully folding their clothes and wrapping their toys in newspaper. I carried boxes down the stairs and loaded them into my truck. A neighbor came out while we were loading the 3rd trip. She was an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun. She looked at Finn and then at me. "Is Katie really gone? The police took her away?" Finn nodded. The woman's face showed relief. "Thank God. I've been telling him for months I'd testify if he ever reported her. I saw her hit him through my kitchen window more times than I can count." She looked at me. You must be Katie's father. I'm glad you finally know the truth. I couldn't find words to respond. She patted Finn's arm and went back inside. The kids stayed with her during our trips, and I could hear them laughing through her window at one point. It made me feel slightly better knowing they had at least one safe adult in their life before today. As we loaded the last boxes into the truck, Finn stopped and turned to me. His voice came out quiet and thick. Thank you for believing me, for putting the house in my name. I was terrified you'd dismiss me like everyone else does. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Nobody takes it seriously when a man says his wife beats him. I accepted I might never escape. I was just trying to keep the kids safe until they were old enough to tell someone themselves. I felt shame burn through my whole body. I'm sorry it took video evidence for me to see the truth. I should have questioned her stories. I should have talked to you directly. Finn shook his head. Katie is incredibly convincing. Don't beat yourself up. I doubted my own reality sometimes before I started recording everything. We drove back to the new house in silence. I helped Finn set up beds for the kids and unpack the basics they'd need for tonight. The boy, whose name I learned was Michael, wanted his nightlight plugged in next to his bed. The little girl, Sophie, insisted her stuffed rabbit had to sleep on her pillow. By the time everything was set up enough for them to sleep, it was almost 8 at night. I hugged both kids goodbye and promised I'd come back soon. Finn walked me to my truck. Thank you. For everything. I drove home in a fog. My brain couldn't process what happened. My daughter was in jail. My son-in-law was actually a victim. I had grandchildren I never knew existed. The house I bought to save Katie actually saved Finn and the kids instead. When I pulled into my driveway, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Katie's mother, my ex-wife. We'd been divorced for 15 years but stayed in contact because of Katie. She must have heard about the arrest. I wasn't ready to talk to her. She'd want me to bail Katie out. She'd make excuses for Katie's behavior like she always did. I couldn't do that anymore. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes before going inside. My house felt empty and quiet. I made coffee even though it was late. I needed something to do with my hands. Around midnight, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I called my brother Ross. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. Do you know what time it is? I told him everything. The 2 years of lies, the security footage, Derek, the confrontation, the knife, Katie's arrest, the kids. All of it poured out of me in one long stream. Ross didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said he was coming over tomorrow. I shouldn't be alone right now. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Ross showed up at 9 with his wife, Juliet. She's a family therapist and immediately understood what I was going through. We sat at my kitchen table, and she explained that Katie likely has a serious personality disorder. She talked about people who see themselves as victims, even when they're hurting others. I kept saying I should have seen the signs. Juliet put her hand on mine and told me firmly that skilled manipulators fool everyone. Even trained professionals get taken in. She said I was a victim too. That thought hadn't occurred to me. My phone rang while we were talking. Katie's mother. I almost didn't answer, but Juliet nodded at me. I picked up. My ex-wife started screaming before I could say hello. How could I abandon our daughter? How could I side with that manipulative husband? I tried to explain about the evidence, but she wouldn't listen. She insisted Finn must have faked everything, that I was a fool for believing him. She demanded I bail Katie out immediately. I told her no. She could do it if she wanted, but I wouldn't enable Katie's abuse anymore. She called me heartless and hung up. Juliet squeezed my shoulder. Ross made more coffee. That afternoon, my ex-wife bailed Katie out. I knew she would. Within an hour, my phone rang with Katie's number. I almost didn't answer, but I needed to hear what she'd say. She was crying, begging me to understand her side, saying everyone was lying about her. I told her I'd seen the footage and screenshots. I knew the truth now. She needed serious professional help. Her crying stopped instantly. Her voice turned cold and hard. She screamed that I was dead to her. She'd make sure I never saw my grandchildren again. She'd tell everyone what a terrible father I was. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. That was my daughter, the little girl I raised. Somewhere along the way, she became someone I didn't recognize. I called Finn to warn him that Katie made bail and might try to come to the house. He thanked me but said he already filed for an emergency restraining order and temporary custody. His lawyer had everything ready to go. He'd been preparing for this possibility for months, documenting everything, building a case, just waiting for the chance to escape. I told him I'd support him however he needed. He said that meant everything to him and the kids. 2 days after Katie's arrest, Detective Louis Bertrand called my cell. He needed my full statement about the knife incident and everything Katie told me over the past 2 years. I drove to the police station that afternoon and sat across from him in a small interview room with gray walls and a table between us. He had a recording device and a notepad. I started talking and didn't stop for 3 hours. Every story Katie told me about Finn came back in vivid detail now. How she said he threw things at her when I could see in the footage that she was the one throwing lamps and dishes. How she claimed he screamed at the kids when the videos showed him speaking quietly while she raged. How she said he controlled all their money when the bank records Finn showed me proved she had access to everything and was draining accounts for her affairs. Detective Bertrand wrote everything down and asked specific questions about dates and details. He explained they were building a domestic violence case against Katie, and my testimony about her 2-year deception campaign would help establish her pattern of behavior. The pattern showed she was skilled at manipulation and willing to destroy someone's reputation to maintain control. I felt sick going through each lie and realizing I'd believed every single one. The detective's expression stayed neutral and professional, but I could tell he'd seen cases like this before. He mentioned that false allegations of abuse were more common than people realized, and they destroyed innocent people's lives. When we finished, he thanked me for coming forward and said my willingness to testify against my own daughter showed real character. I didn't feel like it showed character. I felt like it showed how badly I'd failed Finn and those kids for 2 years. Before I left the station, Detective Bertrand mentioned something else. 2 of Finn's former co-workers had come forward with statements about witnessing Katie's public verbal abuse of him. She would show up at his workplace and berate him in front of customers, called him worthless and stupid and a terrible father, made scenes in the store where he worked as a manager. But the moment anyone tried to intervene or asked if she was okay, Katie would immediately switch. Tears would start flowing and she'd play the victim. She'd say Finn was controlling and she was just trying to get money for groceries. The co-workers said they believed her at first because she was so convincing. But after it happened multiple times, they started noticing the pattern. They saw how Finn never raised his voice or fought back, how he would apologize to customers after she left and make excuses for her behavior, how he looked exhausted and defeated. One co-worker finally pulled him aside and asked if he needed help. Finn broke down and showed her some of the bruises Katie had given him, but he begged her not to report it because Katie threatened to claim he abused her if anyone found out the truth. The co-worker felt terrible that she didn't push harder to help him. Now she was giving a statement to make up for it. Detective Bertrand said the pattern of behavior spanned years based on these testimonies. I sat there feeling physically ill. All those times I sent Katie supportive texts, telling her to stay strong against her abusive husband. All those times I offered to help her leave him. I was actually encouraging her to continue tormenting an innocent man who was trapped and terrified. The detective could see I was struggling and told me I was a victim of her manipulation too. That didn't make me feel better. I drove home in a fog and found Finn's name on my phone screen an hour later. He was calling to ask if I'd be willing to attend his emergency custody hearing as a witness. His voice sounded nervous but hopeful. He explained that having Katie's own father testify about her deception and violence would be powerful evidence for the judge. His lawyer thought it could make the difference between supervised visitation and possibly shared custody. I agreed immediately without even asking when the hearing was scheduled. I told him it was the least I could do after enabling Katie's abuse for 2 years. I could hear the relief in his voice when he thanked me. He said his lawyer thought they had a strong case for sole custody, with supervised visitation only. The security footage combined with the knife incident and now witness statements from multiple people painted a clear picture. Katie's arrest record and the restraining order violation added weight to the argument that she was dangerous. Finn mentioned the kids were doing okay, but Michael kept asking if Mommy was going to come take them away. I promised him I'd do everything I could to make sure those kids stayed safe with him. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and stared at the wall for a long time. The custody hearing happened 3 days later in family court. I arrived early and sat in the waiting area watching lawyers and families move through the hallways. Ross came with me for support even though he wasn't testifying. When we entered the courtroom, I saw Katie sitting at a table with her lawyer. She looked smaller somehow. Her hair was pulled back and she wore a conservative dress. When she saw me walk in and sit on Finn's side of the room, her face went through several expressions. Surprise first, then hurt, then something cold and hard. The judge entered and everyone stood. He was an older man with gray hair and reading glasses. The hearing started with Katie's lawyer presenting her side. He painted Katie as a struggling mother who made one mistake in a moment of fear. He claimed the security footage was taken out of context and didn't show the full picture of their relationship. He argued that Katie loved her children and deserved a chance to maintain her relationship with them. Then Katie took the stand. I watched her perform for the judge with tears and a trembling voice. She claimed Finn manipulated me against her, said the security footage was edited to make her look bad, insisted she only grabbed the knife because she was terrified when she found herself cornered by 3 men in that house. She cried about missing her babies and wanting to be a good mother. The judge listened without expression. Then Finn's lawyer called me to the stand. I walked up and sat down and put my hand on the Bible to swear to tell the truth. Katie's lawyer tried to object to my testimony, but the judge overruled him. I started talking about the 2 years of lies Katie told me. Every story about Finn's abuse that I now knew was fabricated. The security footage I'd seen showing Katie was the actual abuser. The knife incident where she threatened people including her own father. I explained how skilled Katie was at manipulation and how completely I'd believed her until I saw undeniable proof. I talked about the affairs and the lies and the threats Finn had endured. Katie's face went through shock first when she realized I was actually testifying against her. Then betrayal like I'd stabbed her in the back. Finally, her expression settled into cold hatred. Her eyes locked on mine with pure rage. I kept talking and didn't look away. When I finished, Katie's lawyer tried to discredit my testimony by saying I was biased toward Finn now. But the judge seemed unconvinced by that argument. The judge asked to review the security footage in his chambers. We all waited in the courtroom for 30 minutes while he watched the videos on a laptop. When he came back, his expression was grim. He granted Finn temporary sole custody, with Katie allowed only supervised visitation at a family center. He extended the restraining order to include the children's school and activities. Katie couldn't come within 500 feet of their school or any place where they had regular activities. All visitation had to happen at the approved facility with a trained supervisor present. Katie's lawyer started to argue, but the judge cut him off. He stated clearly that the evidence of abuse and the knife incident made unsupervised contact unsafe for everyone involved. The pattern of behavior was too concerning to risk the children's safety. Katie's face went white and then red. She started shaking. Katie jumped up from her chair and started screaming. She yelled that we were all going to regret this, that she'd prove Finn was the real abuser and everyone would see the truth. That I was the worst father in the world for abandoning my own daughter. Security guards moved toward her, but she kept screaming until her lawyer grabbed her arm and tried to calm her down. The judge banged his gavel and warned that another outburst would result in contempt charges. Katie finally stopped yelling, but her whole body was rigid with rage. She turned and stormed toward the exit. I sat there feeling completely hollowed out. My daughter just called me the worst father in the world in open court. Part of me wanted to run after her and try to explain, but the bigger part knew there was nothing I could say that would make her understand. I was grieving the daughter I thought I knew while accepting the reality of who she actually was. These two versions couldn't exist in the same space. Ross put his hand on my shoulder from the seat behind me. He leaned forward and quietly said I did the right thing. I nodded, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Finn looked relieved but exhausted. His lawyer was packing up papers and explaining next steps. I just sat there trying to process what had happened. Over the next week, I started meeting with Juliet for therapy sessions. She'd offered after seeing how much I was struggling with everything. We sat in her home office with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She helped me understand that I was a victim of Katie's manipulation too. That parental love made me vulnerable to believing her stories because I wanted to protect my child. She explained that people with personality disorders like Katie likely had were incredibly skilled at finding and exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. They knew exactly what to say to make people believe them. I kept saying I should have known something was wrong, should have questioned Katie's stories more, should have talked to Finn directly years ago, should have protected those kids sooner. Juliet gently but firmly told me that beating myself up wouldn't change the past. The important thing was that I saw the truth now and was taking action to support the actual victims. She said the grief I was feeling was real and valid. I was mourning the loss of the daughter I thought I had. That relationship was built on lies, but the love I felt was genuine. Processing that contradiction was going to take time. Some sessions I cried, some sessions I just sat there numb. But slowly I started to accept that loving Katie and holding her accountable weren't mutually exclusive. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, my phone buzzed with a text from Finn. He asked if I'd like to come meet the kids properly now that things had calmed down a bit. I stared at the message for a long time before responding yes. The drive to the house felt longer than it actually was. I was nervous about facing Michael and Sophie after everything that happened. They'd seen me at the confrontation when their mother grabbed a knife. They'd been terrified that day. I didn't know if they'd even want to see me. I parked in the driveway of the house I'd bought and walked up to the front door. Finn answered with a tired but genuine smile. The house looked different now, with furniture and kids' toys scattered around. It looked lived in and safe. Michael appeared from the hallway and stopped when he saw me. He was 7 years old with dark hair like Finn's and wary eyes. I knelt down to his level and said hello. He stayed back near his father and didn't say anything at first. Then Sophie came running from another room. She was 3 with blonde curls and didn't seem to remember the scary parts as clearly. She grabbed onto Finn's leg and peeked at me with curious eyes. Finn introduced me as their grandpa and explained I was his friend who helped them move into this house. Sophie's face lit up, and she asked if I wanted to see her new room. Michael stayed quiet but nodded when Finn asked if that was okay. I spent the afternoon playing with the kids while Finn made dinner in the kitchen. Sophie showed me every toy in her room and insisted I sit through a tea party with her stuffed animals. Michael eventually warmed up and showed me his book collection. He was reading above grade level and proud of it. The house felt peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. No tension in the air, no walking on eggshells, just a father and his kids being comfortable in their own space. It was strange to be building a relationship with grandchildren I didn't know existed until a week ago. Strange, but good. As the afternoon went on, Michael started asking more questions. He wanted to know if I lived nearby and if I'd come back to visit. I promised him I would come as often as they wanted me to. Then he got quiet for a minute before asking the question I knew was coming. He asked if I knew his mom was mean to his dad. I sat down on his bed next to him and told him honestly that I didn't know. That his mom lied to me too. That I thought his dad was the mean one, but I was wrong. Michael nodded like this made sense to him. He said his mom lies a lot. Said she told them daddy was bad, but daddy never hurt them. Only mommy hurt Daddy. The matter-of-fact way he said it broke something in my chest. This 7-year-old had been living with the truth of his mother's abuse his whole life, while I believed her lies from a distance. During dinner, Finn opened up about the years of abuse and isolation in a way he hadn't before. The kids were watching a movie in the living room, so we could talk freely in the kitchen. He explained how Katie would threaten to claim he hit her if he ever tried to leave or tell anyone the truth. She'd say no one would believe a man claiming abuse from a woman. She'd say she'd make sure he never saw his kids again. She'd describe in detail how she'd tell police he was violent and dangerous. Finn said he stayed to protect Michael and Sophie because he was terrified Katie would get custody and hurt them without him there to intervene. He couldn't risk leaving them alone with her. So he endured the hitting and the verbal abuse and the affairs. He documented everything secretly and waited for any chance to escape safely with his children. When I called him that night before the house tour, he saw his opportunity. He knew if he could show me the truth, maybe I'd help him instead of helping Katie trap him further. I listened with growing horror as he described years of being held hostage in his own home. My daughter had used his love for his children as a weapon against him. She knew he'd endure anything to keep them safe, and she exploited that ruthlessly. Finn's voice stayed calm and steady while he talked, but his hands shook slightly. He said telling me this felt like finally being able to breathe after holding his breath for years. I told him I was sorry for not seeing it sooner. Sorry for every supportive text I sent Katie while she was tormenting him. He said he understood why I believed her, that Katie was convincing and I had no reason to doubt my own daughter, but now we could move forward and focus on keeping the kids safe and happy. That was what mattered most. A few days later, Finn called me sounding tired and worried about the supervised visitation that was starting the following week. He explained that Katie would get to see Michael and Sophie every Saturday at a family center downtown, with a trained supervisor in the room the whole time. The supervisor would watch everything and write reports for the court, but Finn said Katie was really good at subtle manipulation that was hard for outsiders to catch. She knew how to say things that sounded innocent, but were actually designed to make the kids feel guilty or scared. He admitted he was dreading having to drop the kids off and see Katie, even briefly in the parking lot, because she'd probably try to cause a scene or say something to upset him in front of the children. I offered right away to handle all the driving, picking the kids up from his house and taking them to the visits, then bringing them back afterward so Finn wouldn't have to deal with any contact with Katie at all. The relief in his voice was immediate, and he accepted, thanking me multiple times for taking that stress off his shoulders. We agreed I'd arrive at his house by 9 on Saturday mornings to get Michael and Sophie to their 10 o'clock appointment. That same evening, my phone rang with my ex-wife's number showing on the screen. I almost didn't answer because our last conversation had ended with her screaming at me, but something made me pick up. Instead of yelling this time, she was crying so hard she could barely get words out. She begged me through her tears to please help get Katie's custody back, saying our daughter was going through such a hard time and needed her family's support, not punishment. She insisted that Katie just made some mistakes and everyone was being too harsh, that taking her children away was cruel and would destroy her. I took a deep breath and explained as gently as I could that Katie wasn't just going through a hard time. She was genuinely dangerous to Finn, and potentially to the kids if she got angry enough. I told my ex-wife that the security footage didn't lie, that I'd seen with my own eyes what Katie had done for years, and that enabling her behavior by pretending it wasn't serious wouldn't help anyone, especially not Katie herself. My ex-wife's crying turned to anger fast, and she said I'd turned my back on my own daughter for a man I barely knew. Before I could respond, she hung up on me, and I sat there staring at my phone knowing that conversation had probably damaged our relationship beyond repair. She'd chosen to believe Katie's lies over the documented evidence, and I couldn't make her see the truth if she didn't want to. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. I showed up at Finn's house at 9 sharp and found both kids already dressed and waiting, though Michael looked anxious and Sophie seemed confused about where they were going. Finn gave them both long hugs and reminded them to be good, then walked them out to my car. The drive to the family center took 20 minutes and Michael stayed quiet the whole time while Sophie chattered about her toys. The building was plain and institutional, with a waiting room that had worn furniture and children's drawings taped to the walls. A woman with a clipboard checked us in and explained she'd be supervising the visit, then led Michael and Sophie through a door into a room where Katie was already waiting. I caught a glimpse of Katie's face lighting up when she saw the kids, and then the door closed. I sat in the waiting room for the next hour, trying to read a magazine but mostly just watching the clock. When the door finally opened, the supervisor came out first with a tight expression, followed by Sophie, who was crying, and Michael, who looked completely shut down with blank eyes. Katie tried to follow them out, but the supervisor firmly told her to wait inside while the children left the building. I got both kids to the car quickly and buckled them in, noticing how Michael's hands were shaking slightly. The drive back was silent except for Sophie's sniffling. About halfway home, Michael spoke up in a small voice and asked if they had to keep seeing Mommy. The question broke my heart, but I kept my voice steady and told him the judge said yes for now, but that his daddy and I were keeping them safe, and the supervisor was there to make sure Mommy behaved appropriately. Michael nodded but didn't look convinced, and I made a mental note to tell Finn how rough the visit had been. 2 days later, Detective Bertrand called my cell phone with an update about Katie's case. He explained that the district attorney had reviewed all the evidence, including the security footage, the screenshots, witness statements, and the knife incident report, and decided to move forward with formal domestic violence charges against Katie. The accumulated documentation made a really strong case, especially combined with the physical evidence from that day at the house. Detective Bertrand said the DA's office was offering Katie a plea deal that would include mandatory anger management classes, a full psychological evaluation, and probation, instead of jail time if she pleaded guilty to reduced charges. I asked what would happen if Katie refused the deal, and he said they'd go to trial, which would mean all of us testifying in court, and possibly the kids being interviewed by Child Protective Services as part of the proceedings. He mentioned that the DA was confident they could win at trial, but it would be harder on everyone involved, especially Michael and Sophie. I thanked him for the update and said I hoped Katie would take the deal, though I had a sinking feeling she wouldn't. Sure enough, Finn called me the next afternoon sounding stressed and said Katie had rejected the plea deal completely. She was insisting she was innocent and claiming we'd all conspired against her, that the evidence was fake or taken out of context. Apparently her lawyer had strongly advised her to take the deal, explaining that going to trial was risky and the evidence against her was substantial, but Katie had fired him on the spot for not believing in her innocence. She'd already hired a new lawyer who promised to fight the charges hard and prove that Finn had manipulated everyone. Finn's lawyer had warned him that this meant we were heading for a full trial, where we'd all have to testify under oath, and that Child Protective Services would probably want to interview Michael and Sophie about their home life with both parents. The stress in Finn's voice was clear, and I told him we'd get through it together, that the truth was on our side, and the evidence would speak for itself. The following Tuesday, a woman named Anya Tyson from Child Protective Services showed up at Finn's house to do a home evaluation and interview the children. I'd come over that morning because Finn had asked me to be there for support, and I was glad I did because he looked nervous when he opened the door for her. Anya was professional but kind, explaining that she needed to assess the home environment and talk with Michael and Sophie as part of the ongoing custody case. She walked through the whole house slowly, taking notes on her tablet about the clean conditions, the kids' bedrooms with their toys and books, the stocked refrigerator, the safety measures like outlet covers and cabinet locks. She asked Finn questions about his daily routine with the kids, their school and preschool arrangements, their medical care, and how he handled discipline. Finn answered everything calmly and honestly, and I could see Anya's expression softening as she realized this was a good, stable home. Then she sat down on the living room floor with Michael and Sophie and spent almost an hour just playing with them and asking gentle questions about their life. She asked about their favorite foods, what they liked to do with Daddy, if they felt safe at home, and carefully worded questions about their memories of living with both Mommy and Daddy together. Michael was cautious at first, but gradually opened up, while Sophie mostly just wanted to show Anya her stuffed animals. What struck me most was how both children clearly felt comfortable and safe talking about their father, but got quiet and tense when Anya gently asked about their mother. After the kids went outside to play in the backyard, Anya turned to me and asked about my perspective as Katie's father and the children's grandfather. I took a deep breath and told her everything, starting with the 2 years Katie spent lying to me about Finn being abusive, the security footage that showed the truth, the confrontation at the house, and my current commitment to supporting Finn and the kids however they needed. I admitted I'd been completely fooled by my own daughter and felt guilty about enabling her abuse of Finn for so long, but that now I understood the situation clearly and was determined to help keep the children safe. Anya took detailed notes and said something that surprised me. She explained that having the maternal grandfather actively supporting the father's custody was really unusual and significant, that in most cases family members sided with their own blood relative regardless of evidence. The fact that I'd changed my position after seeing proof spoke to how serious Katie's behavior must be, and that would be noted in her report to the court. That weekend, Ross called and invited Finn and the kids over for Sunday dinner at his and Juliet's house. He said they wanted to show family support and help Michael and Sophie feel connected to their grandfather's side of the family, since they'd missed out on knowing us for so long. Finn accepted gratefully, and we all drove over together that Sunday afternoon. Ross and Juliet's house was warm and welcoming, and they'd clearly prepared for the kids with games and activities set up. Watching my brother and his wife greet Finn with genuine kindness and respect made my throat tight, because this was what family should have been doing all along instead of believing Katie's lies. Ross shook Finn's hand firmly and told him he was glad to finally meet him properly, and Juliet gave him a warm hug. Michael was shy at first, but Ross got him talking about soccer, and soon they were kicking a ball around in the backyard together. Sophie attached herself to Juliet immediately, following her around the kitchen and helping stir ingredients for dinner. Over the meal, Ross and Juliet asked Finn about his work and his interests, treating him like a valued family member rather than the monster Katie had painted him as. They asked the kids about school and preschool, played games with them after dinner, and made sure everyone felt included and comfortable. By the end of the evening, Sophie had fallen asleep on Ross's lap while he read her a story, and Michael was showing Juliet his drawings. Driving home, Finn thanked me quietly for having family who welcomed him and the kids so completely, and I told him this was just the beginning of building the family support system he should have always had. 3 weeks later, I was getting ready for bed around 11 at night when I heard a car door slam outside my house. I looked out the window and saw Katie stumbling up my front walkway, clearly drunk based on how she was weaving. My heart started racing as she reached my front door and began pounding on it, calling my name and crying. I didn't open the door, instead standing behind it and asking what she wanted. Through the wood, I could hear her sobbing that she needed my help to get her kids back, that she was sorry for everything, that she never meant to hurt anyone. She claimed Finn had provoked her into reacting badly, that she'd just been stressed and overwhelmed, and that if I would just help her one more time, everything would be fine. Her words were slurred and desperate, and I felt torn between my instinct to help my daughter and my knowledge of what she'd actually done. I told her through the locked door that I loved her, but I couldn't help her, that she needed to accept responsibility for her actions and get real professional help. The crying stopped abruptly and turned to screaming. She yelled that I'd chosen Finn over my own daughter, that I was a terrible father, that she'd never forgive me for betraying her like this. She kept screaming and pounding on the door, and I could hear my neighbor's lights turning on. I told Katie she needed to leave because she was violating the restraining order by coming to my house, but she just screamed louder that she didn't care about the stupid restraining order. That's when I pulled out my phone and called 911, reporting that someone was violating a restraining order at my address. The dispatcher said officers were on their way and to stay inside with the doors locked. Katie must have heard me on the phone because her screaming got even louder, calling me every name she could think of. Within 10 minutes, a patrol car pulled up with lights flashing, and I recognized Officer Hoffman getting out. He approached Katie carefully, who was now sitting on my front steps still crying, and I watched through the window as he spoke to her calmly. She didn't resist when he helped her stand up and explained she was under arrest for violating the restraining order. She just went completely limp, letting him guide her to the patrol car without fighting. He put her in the back seat and then came to my door to get my statement about what happened. I explained the whole situation while watching Katie through the patrol car window, and I felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. The daughter I'd raised wouldn't have become this person who showed up drunk in the middle of the night violating court orders, except somehow she had. And I didn't know if the Katie I remembered had ever really existed, or if I'd just been blind to who she truly was all along. The next morning, my phone rang at 7. Finn's name on the screen made me sit up in bed fast. I answered, and he asked if I was okay after last night. His voice sounded worried and tired. I told him I was managing, but felt weird that he was checking on me when Katie was his abuser. He said we're family now and we need to support each other. Katie hurt both of us in different ways, and we're both working through it. The call only lasted a few minutes, but something shifted in how I saw Finn. He wasn't just my son-in-law anymore. He was someone who cared about me even after everything my daughter put him through. 2 hours later, my ex-wife called. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. Katie was back in jail because violating the restraining order meant her bail got revoked. Now they set new bail at $50,000. My ex-wife couldn't afford it. She asked if I would help pay it. I sat there holding the phone and feeling torn in half. Every parent instinct said help your child, but I knew Katie needed to face real consequences. I told my ex-wife as gently as I could that Katie needs to stay in jail. Maybe hitting bottom will push her toward actually getting help. My ex-wife called me heartless and hung up on me. I sat alone in my house for an hour just staring at the wall. Was I doing the right thing, or was I abandoning my daughter when she needed me most? The guilt felt like it was crushing my chest. I couldn't eat breakfast, couldn't focus on anything, just kept replaying my ex-wife's voice calling me heartless. Around noon, I drove to Ross and Juliet's house. Juliet took one look at my face and made me sit down. I told her about the bail situation and my ex-wife's call. Juliet listened and then said something that changed how I saw everything. She explained that supporting Katie doesn't mean protecting her from consequences. Real love sometimes means letting someone hit rock bottom so they'll finally seek help. I argued that every parent instinct says rescue your child. Juliet nodded and said yes, but rescuing Katie just enables her to hurt more people. She asked if I wanted to help Katie or help Katie's victims. The question hit me hard. I thought about Finn and Michael and Sophie. The guilt was crushing some days. But then I pictured the kids thriving with their father in that house, safe and happy and not walking on eggshells around their mom. I knew I made the right choice even though it hurt. 3 weeks after Katie went back to jail, her new lawyer called Finn. Katie was accepting the plea deal. She would do anger management and psychological evaluation and continued supervised visitation. In exchange, the domestic violence charges got reduced. The lawyer said he convinced Katie that going to trial would likely mean worse outcomes, maybe even losing all parental rights. Finn called me right after and said he was relieved to avoid trial, but he knew this was just the beginning of a long legal process. The plea hearing happened on a Wednesday morning. I sat in the courtroom and watched Katie stand up to give her statement. She apologized to the court for her actions, said she was sorry for causing problems, but she never once looked at Finn, never actually apologized to him. She framed everything as mutual conflict that got out of hand. Stress from being a mother, misunderstandings that got bigger than they should have. The judge listened with a blank expression. When Katie finished, he said, Completion of all court-ordered treatment is mandatory, not optional. His tone made it clear he saw through her performance. The psychological evaluation results came 2 weeks later. I read the report sitting at my kitchen table. Katie has borderline personality disorder with narcissistic traits. The psychologist explained her pattern of perceiving abandonment everywhere, her intense manipulation of people around her, her complete inability to accept responsibility for anything. The report recommended intensive therapy and possibly medication. It noted that without treatment, Katie will likely continue the pattern of destructive relationships. I sat there feeling grief mixed with relief, finally having an explanation for behaviors I never understood. All those years of chaos and drama and wondering what I did wrong as a parent. Now I knew it was a disorder that needed professional help. Over the next month, Finn and I settled into a routine. Every Thursday evening, I watch Michael and Sophie so Finn can attend his support group for male domestic violence survivors. The first time the kids called me Grandpa naturally, without prompting, I almost cried. We were building real relationships based on truth instead of Katie's manufactured crisis. Michael showed me his homework and asked for help with math. Sophie wanted me to play dolls with her. These evenings became the highlight of my week, a chance to be the grandfather I should have been from the beginning. Katie's supervised visitations continued every week. The supervisor filed reports after each visit. Katie struggled to focus on the children's needs versus her own agenda. She spent visit time trying to get Michael and Sophie to relay messages to Finn, asked them questions about their life with Dad instead of just being present with them. Michael started saying he didn't want to go to visits. Sophie didn't seem to understand why Mommy couldn't come home. The supervisor noted all of this in her reports. 6 weeks after the confrontation at the house, we all went to family court. Quentin Adams was the mediator handling long-term custody arrangements. Katie's lawyer pushed hard for unsupervised visitation, said Katie completed her anger management course. She deserved a chance at eventual shared custody. Finn's lawyer argued for continued supervision until Katie completes treatment and shows real changed behavior. Not just checking boxes, but actual accountability. I had to testify again. This time about Katie's ongoing manipulation attempts, her lack of genuine accountability in everything she does. Katie stared at me from across the courtroom with cold hatred in her eyes. The judge reviewed all the supervisor reports and psychological evaluation. He took 20 minutes to read through everything while we all sat in silence. Then he announced his ruling. Continued sole custody with Finn. Supervised visitation to continue for minimum 6 months. Katie must complete anger management and show 1 full year of stable mental health treatment before any custody modification will be considered. Katie's face went completely blank when she heard the timeline. 1 year. Not 1 month or even 6 months. An entire year of proving she changed before she could even ask for unsupervised visits. I watched her process this and wondered if she was finally understanding something. That her actions have lasting consequences she can't manipulate her way out of. That crying and performing and playing victim won't work anymore. The judge had seen through all of it, and now she had to actually do the work, or lose her kids forever. Outside the courthouse after the judge finished talking, Finn pulled me aside while Katie's lawyer was still packing up papers. He asked if I'd be willing to get listed as emergency contact and backup guardian for Michael and Sophie in case anything ever happened to him. I agreed right away without even thinking about it. We drove to the family court office that same afternoon and filled out all the paperwork together, me signing form after form while Finn made copies of everything. The clerk processed it quickly and handed us the stamped documents, and Finn shook my hand and thanked me for trusting him enough to do this. I told him it should be me thanking him for trusting me after everything Katie put him through. Walking back to our cars, I felt like I was finally being the father and grandfather I should have been all along, just for the wrong generation, protecting the kids my daughter should have protected herself. 2 weeks later, Katie started her court-ordered anger management classes every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Her therapist called Finn's cell phone one afternoon, asking if he'd be willing to come in for a joint session as part of Katie's treatment plan. Finn looked stressed when he told me about it over dinner at his place. He called his own therapist right there and put it on speaker, so I could hear the advice. The therapist explained that Katie needed to work on her own problems before any couples counseling would be safe or helpful for either of them. Joint sessions only worked when both people were ready to take responsibility, and Katie wasn't there yet. Finn texted Katie's therapist back with a polite decline, explaining his therapist's recommendation. Katie apparently lost it during her next session, screaming at her therapist that Finn was refusing to participate in her healing, and this proved he never cared about fixing their marriage. Her therapist wrote this all down in the session notes, more evidence that Katie still saw herself as the victim in everything. I started going to therapy myself around the same time, meeting with Juliet twice a week to work through the mess in my head. Loving my daughter while accepting she's an abuser felt impossible some days. I'd sit in Juliet's office and cry about missing the Katie I thought I knew, then feel guilty for grieving when Finn and the kids were the real victims. Juliet kept reminding me that both things could be true at once. I could hope Katie got help while also protecting the people she hurt. I could love her and still choose to support Finn and the grandkids. She helped me see that enabling Katie's behavior for 2 years wasn't love. It was just making it easier for her to keep hurting people. Some days I managed this balance pretty well, taking the kids to the park and feeling good about being there for them. Other days I'd see something that reminded me of little Katie, back when she was 5 and sweet and hadn't turned into whatever she was now, and I'd have to pull over and just sit in my car for a while. 3 months after the confrontation at the house, Michael's school called Finn during work hours. The principal said Michael got in a fight on the playground, and both parents needed to come in for a meeting. Finn called me asking if I could go with him since Katie obviously couldn't, and I met him at the school 20 minutes later. We sat in the principal's office while Michael waited outside with the secretary. The teacher explained that Michael had punched another kid who was bullying a smaller first grader, knocking him down and giving him a bloody nose. The teacher asked Michael why he did it, and Michael said he couldn't just stand there and let the bully hurt someone smaller. He said that's what his mom did to his dad, hurting someone who couldn't fight back, and nobody should hurt people they're supposed to love, or people who are smaller than them. The teacher looked at us with this understanding expression, clearly putting together pieces of Michael's home situation. Finn hugged Michael and told him he was proud of him for protecting others. But let's work on using words first before fists. Michael got detention for fighting, but the teacher made sure we knew she understood why he did it. Katie completed her anger management course 6 weeks later and got a certificate with her name printed on fancy paper. Her lawyer filed it with the court that same day as evidence she was making real progress toward being a better parent. The court requested the instructor's private evaluation to go along with the certificate, and that report told a very different story. The instructor noted that Katie participated minimally in class discussions, blamed Finn and other people for her anger throughout the sessions, and showed very little real understanding of her own behavior patterns. She completed the required hours and passed the basic tests, but the instructor couldn't honestly say Katie had internalized any of the lessons or changed her thinking. The judge reviewed both documents during a brief hearing and announced the custody arrangement would stay exactly the same. Katie's face went blank when she heard this, probably expecting the certificate alone would be enough to get unsupervised visits. Sophie started preschool that fall in a class with 12 other kids her age. Her teacher called Finn after the first week because Sophie drew a picture during family art time that worried her. The picture showed Daddy, Grandpa, Uncle Ross, and Aunt Juliet all holding hands and smiling, but no mommy anywhere in the drawing. Finn went in to talk to the teacher and explained the custody situation carefully, showing her the court orders and supervised visitation schedule. The teacher understood and said she'd keep an eye on Sophie's emotional state. Sophie apparently told the whole class during circle time that her mommy could only visit at the special building because she made bad choices and hurt people. The teacher said it was heartbreaking to hear a 4-year-old explain this so matter-of-factly, but it also showed Sophie was processing the reality of her family situation in a healthy way. She knew her mom wasn't safe to be around without supervision, and she wasn't confused about why things were the way they were. Derek called me out of nowhere on a Saturday morning, asking if we could meet for coffee. I hadn't talked to him since the day at the house when Katie grabbed the knife. We met at a place downtown and sat in a corner booth where nobody would overhear us. Derek looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past few months, dark circles under his eyes and his hands shaking slightly around his coffee cup. He told me he'd been in therapy twice a week trying to process his role in Katie's abuse of Finn, even though he didn't know the truth at the time. He apologized for being part of hurting my son-in-law, and I could hear how much guilt he was carrying. I told him he was a victim too, that Katie manipulated both of us with the same lies about Finn being dangerous. We spent an hour talking about how skilled Katie was at building false realities, making us both believe we were heroes saving her, when really we were just helping her hurt people. Derek asked if I thought Katie would ever really change, and I told him honestly I didn't know, but I wasn't waiting around to find out. Katie's therapist submitted a progress report to the court 4 months into treatment. The report said Katie was beginning to acknowledge that her actions hurt people, which sounded positive at first. But the therapist also noted Katie still struggled with taking full responsibility, often adding explanations about why Finn or stress or other factors made her act the way she did. The therapist recommended Katie continue intensive treatment and suggested she might benefit from a more structured program that specialized in personality disorders. Katie fought against this recommendation hard, telling her lawyer she'd done everything the court asked and deserved to move straight to unsupervised visitation with her kids. Her lawyer tried to explain that the court wouldn't modify custody until she completed all recommended treatment, not just the minimum required classes. Katie apparently threw a fit in the lawyer's office, insisting everyone was conspiring to keep her from her children forever. 4 months after the confrontation, Finn mentioned during one of our weekly dinners that he'd started dating someone. He met her at his support group for domestic violence survivors, another person who understood what he'd been through without him having to explain everything. I told him I was happy for him, and he deserved a healthy relationship with someone who treated him right. He seemed nervous talking about it, saying he wasn't sure how to introduce someone new to Michael and Sophie after everything they'd been through with their mom. But he also sounded hopeful in a way I hadn't heard from him before, like maybe he was finally believing he could have a normal life. I told him to take it slow with the kids, but that they deserved to see their dad in a relationship where people were kind to each other, that it would be good for them to learn what healthy love actually looked like. Katie found out about Finn's new relationship 2 weeks later and completely lost it during supervised visitation. The supervisor's report said Katie spent the first 15 minutes crying to Michael and Sophie that Daddy had replaced her and didn't love their family anymore. She asked them if they'd met the new woman and if Daddy loved her more than he loved Mommy. Sophie started crying because Katie was crying, and Michael went quiet and wouldn't answer any questions. The supervisor had to redirect Katie 4 times to focus on playing with the kids instead of talking about Finn. When Katie wouldn't stop, the supervisor ended the visit 30 minutes early and walked the kids out to where I was waiting in the parking lot. She filed a detailed report about Katie using the children for emotional support in ways that were completely wrong for their ages. This behavior set back any progress Katie had made toward unsupervised visitation, and her lawyer called her that night, warning that manipulating the children would only hurt her case and could result in losing visitation entirely if she kept it up. Michael's therapist called Finn with an update about 3 weeks after that incident, and Finn shared the news with me over dinner at his place. The therapist said Michael was doing really well processing everything he'd seen his mom do to his dad over the years, that having a stable home with his father and knowing his grandpa and extended family supported them made a huge difference in his healing. Sophie was too young for formal therapy, but the therapist noticed during family sessions that she seemed much more relaxed and attached to Finn now, laughing more and having fewer nightmares. Both kids were asking about their mother less and less, and the therapist noted they seemed most calm and happy during the weeks when visitation happened less often. Finn looked relieved hearing this, but also sad, knowing his kids were better off with less contact with their own mother. 6 months after the confrontation at the house, we all went back to court for a review of Katie's progress. The judge read through reports from multiple supervisors and therapists, and his face got more serious with each page. He said Katie had finished the required anger management and basic therapy programs, but every single supervisor reported concerns about her lack of real understanding about what she'd done wrong. The therapist wrote that Katie kept trying to manipulate them during sessions, blaming everyone else for her problems and insisting she was the real victim. One report said Katie showed no genuine insight into her behavior patterns and continued trying to control situations even in supervised settings. The judge looked at Katie and said he was extending supervised visitation for another 6 months and ordering her to join a more intensive therapy program specifically for personality disorders. Katie's face went hard when she heard this, her jaw clenched tight, and her hands gripped the table in front of her. I sat behind Finn and saw the rage in her eyes that she was barely keeping inside, the same look I'd seen right before she grabbed that knife 6 months ago. The judge added that any further manipulation attempts or violations would result in losing visitation completely, and Katie just stared at him with that cold, angry expression. 2 weeks after that hearing, Katie called and asked to meet with me alone at a coffee shop near her apartment. I almost said no, but some part of me hoped maybe she was finally ready to take real responsibility for what she'd done. I drove to the coffee shop and found her sitting in the back corner, looking tired and older than her 32 years. For an hour, she talked at me, insisting everyone was working together against her. She said Finn had poisoned my mind and turned me against her, that he'd manipulated the therapists and supervisors into writing bad reports about her. Katie claimed the videos were edited to make her look worse, that the court system was biased against mothers, that even her own therapist didn't understand her diagnosis was wrong. She went on and on about how unfair everything was, how she was the one suffering, how nobody could see that Finn was actually the problem and she'd just been reacting to his abuse. I sat there listening to her twist reality into something unrecognizable, and I felt this deep sadness settle in my chest. My daughter might never be able to look at herself honestly, might never be capable of the kind of self-reflection needed to actually change. The woman sitting across from me spinning conspiracy theories wasn't the little girl I'd raised, or maybe she was, and I just never wanted to see it. When she finally stopped talking and looked at me expecting support, I told her quietly that I loved her, but I couldn't agree with anything she'd just said. She called me a traitor and walked out. Despite how painful that meeting with Katie was, I found real joy in my relationship with Finn and the kids over those same months. We started having Sunday dinners every single week, either at his place or mine, and I got to watch Michael and Sophie grow and heal in small ways each time I saw them. I went to Michael's soccer games on Saturday mornings and cheered when he scored goals, went to Sophie's preschool performance where she sang songs about shapes and colors. I was building the grandfather relationship I'd missed out on for years while believing Katie's lies about Finn keeping the kids from me. Finn mentioned one Sunday that the kids talked about me all the time during the week, asking when they'd see Grandpa again and telling him stories about things we'd done together. Sophie drew another family picture at preschool and brought it home to show me, and this one had me standing right next to Daddy with both kids between us, all of us smiling. I had to step into the bathroom for a minute because my eyes got watery looking at that picture. Around that same time, Ross called with news that surprised me, but made me incredibly happy. He and Juliet were moving closer to us, maybe 20 minutes away instead of 3 hours. Juliet had been offered a position at a better practice with more resources and a higher salary, and Ross could do his consulting work from anywhere since it was all remote anyway. They said they wanted to be nearby to help support Finn and the kids and me through everything still happening with Katie and the court system. Ross admitted on the phone that part of the reason was they'd gotten really attached to Michael and Sophie over the past months, and they wanted to be the kind of aunt and uncle who were actually present in the kids' lives. I felt grateful in a way that made my throat tight, knowing my brother and his wife were choosing to support the victims instead of enabling the abuser just because she was blood family. So many families would have circled the wagons around Katie, insisting we all needed to forgive and forget. But Ross and Juliet saw the truth and stood with the people who needed protection. 8 months after the confrontation at the house, Finn and the kids were completely settled and doing better than I'd seen in any of the old photos from his marriage. The house I'd bought thinking it would save my daughter had actually saved my son-in-law and grandchildren instead, given them a safe place to build a real life. Michael's grades at the school were excellent. His teacher sent home progress reports showing he was reading above grade level and participating actively in class. Sophie was happy and social at preschool, making friends easily, and coming home each day excited to tell her dad about what she'd learned. Finn himself looked healthier and more relaxed, the constant tension and fear gone from his shoulders and face. He'd gained some weight in a good way, wasn't so thin and exhausted looking anymore. He thanked me regularly for believing him and supporting them through everything, and every time I told him it was the least I could do after enabling Katie's abuse for 2 years by believing her lies. Katie kept going to her supervised visitations each week, but the kids' excitement about seeing their mother had dropped off significantly as they grew more secure in their life with Finn. Michael started asking his dad if he had to keep going when he got older, saying the visits made him feel weird and uncomfortable. Finn explained gently that for now, yes, the judge said he had to go, but as he got older, his feelings and preferences would matter more to the court. Sophie still went along without complaining, but she didn't talk about Mommy much anymore between visits, didn't ask when she could go home to Mommy like she had in the early months. The supervisor's reports mentioned that Katie seemed to sense she was losing her children's affection and had increased her manipulation attempts during visits. She'd try to get them to feel sorry for her, tell them how lonely and sad she was, ask them if Daddy was being mean, or if they missed living with Mommy. But these attempts just pushed the kids further away, made them quieter and more withdrawn during visits, until the supervisor had to redirect Katie to just play with them normally. Looking back on everything that happened over those 8 months, I learned that love sometimes means accepting painful truths about people we care about and choosing to protect their victims even when it breaks our hearts. I lost my daughter in a real way, lost the relationship we'd had and the person I thought she was. But I gained a son and 2 grandchildren who needed me to see the truth and act on it when it mattered most. Katie might never change, might never take real responsibility for the years of abuse she put Finn through or the trauma she caused her own kids. The personality disorder diagnosis suggested she might not be capable of the kind of honest self-reflection that real change requires. Some nights I still grieve the daughter I thought I had, wonder what I missed in her childhood, or what I could have done differently. But most days I'm grateful I finally saw through her lies in time to help the people she hurt most, to give Finn and Michael and Sophie the support and safety they deserved. I'm committed to being the grandfather and father figure they need for whatever time I have left, to showing up at soccer games and preschool performances, to Sunday dinners and bedtime stories. That's what family should be, and I'm grateful I get a second chance to do it right.